Welcome to the Friends of Fantasy Benefits Baseball Podcast. I'm Justin Mason, lead fantasy writer and analyst of friendsoffantasybenefits.com. Joining me, as always, on the pod is Dave McDonald. How you doing, my friend?
Doing good, Justin. Doing good. How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. I'm here. It's cold. I actually have my heater running, so I'm really hoping I don't blow a fuse. It's about 38 degrees in my office right now. So,
God.
Yeah. But other than that, doing all right. How are you doing?
Good. Yeah, it's 24 degrees outside, but inside my apartment, it's like 70. So doing a little warmer than you're doing over there.
Well, speaking of warmer, we have someone from a much warmer climate than us, and that is Phil Hertz of Baseball HQ. Though, Phil, I heard it is not super sunny in Hawaii today.
It's been raining since yesterday around noontime and pouring. We're not talking rain. We had We've had a lightning strike, which sounded like it was next door. We lost Wi-Fi for a while. The lights are flickering. And you guys won't appreciate this, but it's only been about 70 degrees all day today.
Oh, that is brutal, Phil.
No, man, I don't know how you're going to do it. I'm glad you were able to brave the cold.
Yeah, well, actually, we put sweaters on. You know how your body adjusts to,
oh my God.
Where you are. So when it's in the mid 80s and suddenly it's 70 degrees, then out come the sweaters.
That is actually really true. Because I grew up on the East Coast and lived in the Northeast for a while, and so I always thought I was like this, really like tough guy, especially when I moved to California. But now anytime I go back to where it's actually cold, I really struggle.
Last weather tidbit: we had a winter storm warning today and had a foot of snow.
What?
Whoa.
There's this mountain that's like 16,000 feet. They had a foot of snow today.
Well, that's pretty cool.
I can see the mountain from my house.
No, that's awesome. Well,
wow.
You learn something new every day. There was snow in Hawaii. Yes,
you can literally stand on one golf hole and watch people running in the beach, and you can see foot of snow up on the mountain that's the other direction.
That's pretty cool. Phil, remind everybody where you reached on social media, and then talk about what you do over at Baseball HQ.
So my Twitter handle is APRHZ50. At HQ, I contribute to the chat boards. But I also basically, at this point, I'm doing the entire NL's playing time. NL East playing time. So if you ask me a question about the Mets or the Nationals or the Braves, I'm in pretty good shape. I get worse once you go away from there. Up until last June, I was also doing the Orioles, the Blue Jays, the Cardinals, I can't remember, but basically I had about 11 teams, and they've redistributed, which was perfect timing because it coincided with my heart surgery. So I don't know that I could have handled 11 teams. 5 was just perfect.
Well, I'm glad you're recovering well after your heart surgery. It's always great to see you, my friend. I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing you in New York for Tout Wars here. And you've been on a pretty good streak in Tout Wars the last few years, you were telling me.
Yeah, so in 19, I finished first. In 20 was the pandemic year. 21, I was third, and this year I was second. So given the competition, I think that's a pretty good run.
That it is. And I was in that league in 19. I don't think I finished very well.
And is this NL only?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I'm in the NL only.
Yeah.
I've been there for closing in on 15 plus years. The first year I was in it, Nate Silver was in it from 538.
Mm-hmm.
And he finished behind me. So whenever he shows up on TV, I say to my wife, I finished ahead of him in Tout Wars.
It's pretty good bragging rights right there. You can reach Dave on Twitter at RunDMCD. Don't forget that D. You can reach me on Twitter at Justin Mason FWFB. And you can also reach Friends of Fantasy Benefits on Twitter at Fantasy Benefits. definitely give us a 5-star review. Really, really helps us out. If you give us a 5-star review, I'll shout you out on the pod. So don't forget to do that, and throw your Twitter handle in there. Maybe you get a few extra Twitter follows in the process. So I appreciate all of those who have given us 5-star reviews here in the last year or so. It does really, really help out the pod. We are going to do another full episode of Just Moves. It has been a very, very busy off season thus far. I think it is going to start calming down as we don't really have a ton of major free agents left to talk about, or at least that haven't signed. There'll be trades, there'll be things happening. We'll have news, but we'll probably from here on out move into more kind of regimented talks. But let's I'm just going to go in order from where we left off, which was last Monday night. And let's start with Ross Stripling signing a deal to pitch in San Francisco for my San Francisco Giants. This is an interesting move because it seemed like the rotation was already kind of set after signing Sean Manaea. So, Phil, what are your thoughts on Ross Stripling going to San Francisco?
I really like him there, and I would bet on him starting most of the season. We all know there's injuries, but I also, there's performance issues. I just think that given how the Giants have been successful with starting pitching and pitchers in general, I think if you have Ross Stripling on a keeper league, you're in pretty good shape.
Yeah, unfortunately for me, I had to make cuts in a keeper league about a month ago, and Ross Stripling was a guy that I was like, I don't even know what he is at this point of his career, and so I let him go, even though I had him for a decent price. So kicking myself this week for making that move, but it is what it is. Dave, what are your thoughts on Ross Stripling? He's always been a favorite of mine. Has he been a favorite of yours?
Yeah. He's always been like a late pick favorite of mine. He actually, though, he made some adjustments last year. I mean, he was starting to strike guys out a little bit more. His swinging strike rate was the highest it's been since 2018. He started using off-speed pitches more, going away from that fastball, throwing more sliders, throwing more changeups. So, it plays really well in San Francisco, especially. So, like Phil said, I think they're going to need, with all those guys in that rotation, they're going to need some help. Alex Cobb's going to miss time. Manaea will probably miss some time. Alex Wood will definitely miss some time. So I think he'll get a lot of playing time there.
Yeah, I think so. And I think if they do start the year with like with all 6 starters healthy, I think it's pretty easy to put Descalfani kind of in the pen or even run a 6-man rotation, considering kind of the health risk on a lot of these guys. Dave, you just mentioned Alex Wood has had issues. Yeah. Alex Cobb has had issues. Descalfani's coming,
and Manaea's had performance issues.
Yeah. Yeah, so and health issues too. And Stripling has pitched in relief every year, like since ever. So he'll probably get some reliever innings in there as well. So I think that he gives them some flexibility. I think it's a good ad for your team.
I do too. I really liked it a lot, and like I said, I've always been kind of a Stripling guy. So it's fun to see him come back to the NL West and be on my favorite team as opposed to my least favorite team in the Dodgers. So moving on to the next guy, Ryan Yarbrough signs a deal to pitch in Kansas City. Dave, do we care?
He's always got his stands out there. I mean, he limits his walks. He's got good control, but he just doesn't have the stuff. I don't know. He's not really exciting to me. The K percentage is just too low. And then going from Tampa to Kansas City now, I mean, yes, he's in the AL Central, which is nice, but maybe that strikeout percentage goes up a little bit just from facing much worse teams there. But there's just not enough to get me excited. It's a pitcher's park, but the wins won't be there. I'm not really excited about that.
Yeah, I'm not. My reaction was to yawn. And I mean, he'll probably start because Kansas City doesn't have a lot of other options. But
right,
one, Tampa generally seems to win trades, and they let him go. And 2, while he is in the AL Central, under the new schedule, it's not as big a deal as it used to be.
True.
Yeah, I mean, I've been a Yarbrough fan in the past, but he just hasn't looked like himself the last couple seasons. it is a nice park to pitch in. It is a good division to pitch in, but like Phil mentioned, it's a more balanced schedule. I keep saying more balanced as opposed to balanced. I think people keep saying balanced, and that doesn't. You still play the teams in your division more than any other opponents. It's just you're playing them less than you have previously.
Right.
But it's kind of a boring. He's kind of a boring volume play, and he hasn't been able to get the volume in recent years. So I don't know how valuable he can be. I think he's probably more of a streamer. If he seems like he's going deep into games and healthy, then you can pick him up. But I don't know that he's draftable outside of AL only.
He might be worth drafting late in a draft and hold just to see what happens.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. Hey, big news for Cleveland. Mike Zunino coming to town. He signs a contract to come in there and block Bo Naylor from meaningful playing time. Dave, you're a Cleveland Guardians fan. Are you excited about Mike Zunino?
Well, there's a lot of talk about Sean Murphy, but the A's apparently wanted like our top 3 prospects for him. I know that was true at the trade deadline. I'm sure they lowered the cost in the offseason, but apparently not enough to make it worth getting. So I'm glad. I mean, I like Murphy. I just don't think he was worth what they wanted for him. And then, it came down to guys like Wilson Contreras got paid a lot. And there just wasn't a lot of options. And at that point, it's like, you just need a guy the Guardians are big on defensive minded catchers. So apparently I didn't know Zunino is actually a pretty good defender back there, I guess.
Yes.
I'm not, I'm a fantasy baseball guy. I'm not like I don't follow the defensive metrics as much. As long as they're good enough defenders to keep their jobs, that's all I care about. I expect them to add someone else. I don't think Zunino is going to play like every day, like an everyday catcher would. I think he'll play, 3/5 of the time probably, and then they'll have someone for 2/5. I think the goal is to start with the season with Bo Naylor in the minors. They never wanted him to be starting up with them on the team, and that nothing has changed in that regard. They still want to get him to get some more reps in the minors and everything. And I do like Bo, but they want to make sure they have a guy who can lead the pitching staff, because the most important thing to them is the defensive side of catching.
Well, I mean, there's so much. There's just a point with defense where you can't absorb it. I mean, he hit 212 2 years ago. And
Phil, we played Austin Hedges almost every day last year, so we're not. The bar is not high in Cleveland.
Anyway, where I'm going with this is I suspect Bo Naylor is going to get more playing time than many think.
It's possible. I don't know how good Bo Naylor is on defense is the thing. I don't know how his framing is. I don't know how he is at leading a pitching staff, calling a game. Those are the things that they care about more. So I don't know on that side of things.
Yeah, that's a good question. I know Fangraphs doesn't have him of a very high defensive grade, but that being Bo Naylor. So they did sign, I always mispronounce his name, Milbreeze Valoria, who's out of options. They gave him a non-roster invite, so maybe he's kind of the on the opening day roster until Naylor's ready to come up. So that could be the route they're going. So I don't know why they give a catcher like that an invitation to spring training without options, just to let him loose if they weren't anticipating potentially using him. So he might be the kind of the backup answer to Zunino. Zunino is what he is at this point. He's a guy who can't hit his body weight, but he can hit for power. I think the problem with a guy like Zunino at this point in his career is the catching pool in general has just gotten a lot better. And so a guy who might have played as a third or fourth catcher in a draft champions, really doesn't play quite as easily when you have, a much deeper pool than you used to. So I don't know that Zunino has a lot of value outside of very deep leagues, 12-team AL only in draft champions, things like that.
Yeah,
I guess what you could do is if you've got a lot of batting average and you're short on power, then he becomes somebody you might think about late.
Yeah, it makes sense.
I mean, I think that's true for the Guardians. They have a lot of guys who have good plate approaches, and just not a lot of power. And so I think for the Guardians' sake, he makes sense because they needed a big bopper. But, it's just hard to get excited about a guy who can't hit anything above 210 pretty much. So,
yeah. Speaking of guys who struggle to hit 210, Kevin Kiermaier signs a deal to be the center fielder in Toronto. Phil, do you care about Kevin Kiermaier?
Not really. Not in a league where defense doesn't matter. I mean, he may be, to me, a little bit more interesting than Zunino because I think he's had some seasons where he was rosterable as a solid hitter, but he hasn't been healthy for how many years now? And my guess is their idea is they'll probably play Springer at center occasionally and him in center and try to keep both of them healthy.
Yeah, I think that is the plan, but I don't know how well that's going to work.
Yeah, I mean, I gather that his last injury was not one that should carry over, but, health is a skill too.
And for me, I think one of the biggest issues was and I was surprised he signed in Toronto, is because I think he really struggled with that turf in Tampa Bay. So why go to a place like Toronto where you're going to have to play on turf again? I mean, he probably had limited options to begin with, so that may be kind of the main issue. But he's no longer a guy who can really push 20 stolen bases. So his fantasy value is pretty minimal unless he can accumulate 5-6 plate appearances, which I just have a really hard time buying that he's going to be healthy enough to do.
This is Kiermaier's probably last contract. He's 33. Given what his skill set is, it's not going to carry much longer. So I guess he probably took the best dollars out there.
That'd be my guess too. Dave, you care about Kevin Kiermaier?
Nope.
There you go. For those who think, if he does stay healthy, the Blue Jays were not a team that really pushed on the base paths. We saw Whit Merrifield stop running pretty much completely. They'll let some of the guys at the top of the order steal a little bit, but they don't want the guys at the bottom steal. And so even if Kiermaier is healthy, I would project 8 or 9 stolen bases max really for him.
There's just not much upside there, period. And I mean, he's known for his defense. He might be able to help the real team, but he's off my radar for fantasy.
Someone who shouldn't be off your radar for fantasy is Carlos Correa, who signed a 13-year, $350 million deal with my San Francisco Giants, which is a lot of money for a really, really long time. Phil, are you a Carlos Correa fan? Because he's going fairly cheaply right now.
Yeah, I like Correa, and I think that San Francisco is actually a pretty good fit for him. And with regard to the length, I mean, one of the things that's going on right now is teams are giving out long contracts because they're getting their cap number down. But I like Correa a good amount, and I think he is a bargain where he's been going in ADP. The thing for me on the Correa issue is, for somebody who plays in deep leagues, what does this do to Brandon Crawford and Wilmer Flores, and how much does his arrival depress their value?
Yeah, I was talking about this earlier in my chat on Fangraphs this morning because someone asked me the same question. I don't think it really changes much for them. I think Crawford moves to third and plays there full time. I think Wilmer Flores is probably going to take a bulk of first base and then kind of spot in for a guy like Crawford, or if Crawford's covering for Correa. And I think Tyro Estrada is probably pretty close to everyday second baseman. I don't know that it unless the Giants bring someone else in, and that becomes the question. Do they bring back a Brandon Belt on a 1-year deal, or bring in another infielder on kind of a 1-year deal, like an Evan Longoria or someone like that? Then I could see there being a little bit more confusion. But I don't know that it changes a ton for them as things stand right now. I think if you had some hope that JD Davis was going to be a thing, I think then you at this point, it's probably he may not even be on this team come opening day.
Yeah. Well, somebody who watched JD Davis a lot the last couple of years as a Met fan, I don't think that's it. And I'm happy to hear what you say about Wilmer, because he's one of my favorite players ever.
Yeah, they just gave him an extension, a 2-year extension. So I don't think they did that to then block him. So and as much as I love Crawford, he's already said he's got no problem moving to third. That's going to be a really, really good defense.
Good defense,
on the infield, which is something they were missing last year.
Yeah, which could become much more important with the shifting cutback, where you really want some people who can cover some ground.
Yeah, the left side of that infield is going to be really, really strong this year. Dave, what are your thoughts on Correa going to San Francisco?
I've never been a big Correa guy. I mean, if we're talking about like real baseball, I know he plays a good shortstop and everything, but from a fantasy perspective, I feel like he's always been a little overrated. But looking at where he's going in drafts right now, it looks like it's fine. The thing is, I don't think he's going to touch 25 homers again. Like, his high in his career was 26 in 2021, and that was in Houston. Houston's park factor for home runs is 102 for righties. Then he went to the Twins where it was 87, and now he's going to the Giants where it's 77 for righties. So, he's in the second worst park for power after the A's.
I could be wrong, but I think I read somewhere that if you just look at 2022, the power for right-handed batters in San Francisco took a jump up.
It did, and he actually would have had more home runs in San Francisco than he did in Minnesota if you look at the X home runs on StatCast. Yeah. Now, that who knows how much of that is year-to-year flukiness, wind patterns, things like that. In San Francisco, how many night games they had versus how many day games.
Right. All I'm saying is I wouldn't bet my house on there being a power drop-off because he's in San Francisco.
Not a big power drop-off. I don't think he's going to hit 25 again. Like, he hit 22 last year, and he's played 148 and 136 games the last 2 years, which for him was actually pretty good. I would never project him for more than 140 games. But I think he's very solid. Like, the batting metrics are all really good. His max EV is still very good. He hits the ball hard. He barrels a good amount of balls. He's just not a guy that I get excited about personally. Like, he'd be a guy I would look at as a middle infielder if I want to go middle infield somewhat early, or maybe like as a backup plan if I missed out on some of my targets earlier.
Yeah, I mean, anybody who's followed my work over the last few years has heard me kind of rail against drafting Carlos Correa. I think this is the first year that he's actually represented somewhat of a value.
He's always been overdrafted. Yeah, he's always been overdrafted though. Like, people, he's a guy that people always like to overrate, and I think it'll happen in NFBC drafts too. I think like he's just that guy that people are going to look at the batting statistics in terms of max EV and hard hit rate, and people are going to jump him up a bit.
I don't know if they will this year, especially because he's going to San Francisco, which is notoriously considered a pitcher's park. It's a really bad lineup, just in general. So I think he actually could slip a little bit farther. I think what he does right now in terms of the ADP is kind of mark the last decent shortstop. Because here the thing about shortstop, because there's I think a pretty big drop off after him, right? Like, I think the guys after him you want as your middle, the guys before him you're fine with as your shortstop. Like, I think that he's kind of like that kind of end of the tier, so to speak. Obviously, for some people, they're going to be guys who are going after him that maybe they prefer. Or
I was going to say, there's one guy in particular going 2 spots after him, Nico Horner. I think I would still take Nico over Correa.
We're going to talk about Nico Horner at some point because I really feel like I need to be talked into Nico Horner because I'm not understanding.
I'd have to be talked in, although he's going to have some additional value this year because he'll be shortstop and second base eligible.
Yeah. So he's going to gain that eligibility, but we could maybe mention him a little bit when we talk about Swanson here in a little bit. But as far as Correa goes, I've always felt like people thought the stolen bases were coming back. They never did. They're not coming back in San Francisco.
No.
I think he's a fine kind of later tier shortstop. But what as I was starting to mention before was shortstop is one of the best positions in baseball or in terms of fantasy baseball. However, there's some clear cliffs that aren't quite as bad maybe in some other of the infield positions. So it's just something you want to be careful of when you're in a draft. Moving on to Owen Miller, former Cleveland Guardian. Owen Miller traded to Milwaukee. Dave, do you care about Owen Miller now that he's not a Guardian?
No, no. I cared that he stopped getting at bats for the Guardians, and that we actually brought in, Oscar Gonzalez and some other guys who can actually hit. I had no interest in seeing any more of Owen Miller. It was nice that he had a little hot streak at the beginning of the year. That was nice, but quickly
bought him some at bats.
Yeah,
the hot streak got him some at bats, and probably got some fantasy people excited.
Oh,
reality is,
for sure.
Reality is, he doesn't belong on your fantasy team unless it's super duper deep.
Yeah, I agree. Noah Syndergaard signs a 1-year deal with the Dodgers. The Dodgers have been notorious, very similar to the Giants in recent years, on reclamation projects, taking guys who either used to be great or have never been great and making them great in kind of a 1-year context. Phil, is Noah Syndergaard someone you would target just because he's on the Dodgers?
No. It depends on what you mean by target. I wouldn't mind getting him towards the late middle of the draft, but I think, his K rate was down. Now, my one caveat is, there's been some history of pitchers first year back from Tommy John not having their ultimate speed, and then they get a jump the second year. But without that, I don't know. And my other issue is, I know stolen bases may be much easier this year, but if that's the case, is every person who gets to first base going to wind up on third base before the next batter is finished? And I realize that the Dodgers are going to try to fix that, but the Mets tried to fix that. The Angels tried to fix that. The Phillies tried to fix that. It just isn't doable.
Dave, are you a Syndergaard believer, or are you going to buy back in on him?
I mean, I've always been an anti-Syndergaard person. I've always railed against him. He was another guy who was always incredibly overrated through the years. But right now he's going like 392. So at that point it's fine, because if you want, I think as we get closer to the draft, he's going to go up significantly from there, because he's the kind of guy, given his stuff, if his velocity is up, he was throwing 94 last year. Obviously, you need to see him at least at like 96. If he's 96, 97, you're talking about a starter on the LA Dodgers who has the stuff that he does, then he becomes a value. But, he's not typically the kind of guy I would target, but I'm willing to take some risks when you get into the late, picks there, where if they don't work out, you just toss them and pick someone else up. It's not a huge loss.
Yeah, I'm not touching Syndergaard until I see the velocity up. And it's not just the velocity on the fastball. It's the velocity on all of his pitches has been down.
Yeah.
That was my lights flickering again.
Well, hopefully you stick with us. If you don't, hopefully you can get back in.
Hawaii is known for their just violent weather over there. Just such terrible weather.
I told Justin this before you joined, that we've been here for almost 4 years now, and I think we've had more rain in the last 36 hours than we had in the prior 4 years.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's insane. But yeah, Syndergaard for me, it's until I see that velocity back, especially the velocity. I mean, not just on the fastball, but on the slider as well. When he was effective, it was because he had such a biting slider that could just wipe out just about anybody. My fear is we're never going to see that velocity again. Typically with guys coming back from Tommy John, the first thing that comes back is velocity, and the last thing is command and control, right? That has not been the case for Syndergaard. And so I have a fear that he will not be able to get that velocity back. We'll see. If he's pumping 97 in spring training, then I think a lot of people's tunes are.
But here's the question: should we care? Because the one thing I've learned from watching the velocities in the last few years is that, number one, it's incredibly inconsistent from stadium to stadium what the actual velocity reportings are. Number two, a lot of times guys' velocities are way up. Giolito's velocity was up 2 miles an hour last year. It dropped immediately once the season started. So even if his velocity is up, I think the ADP is going to shoot up. I don't think that necessarily means that he's back or anything. But he's the kind of guy that people are going to be quick to get on board with and get excited about. I don't
even if like the ADP jumps up. I mean, he's at pick like 400 right now. Like we're talking about pick 200.
It can go up significantly.
I don't think he's going to jump. I mean, the pool is too deep this year for him to jump up in the top 200, I would think.
Yeah. Another thing about the velocity in spring training is I'm not sure that the technology in a lot of the spring training parks is up to what the major league parks are. So when you see he's hitting 97, it might be 99 and it might be 95. And we really
that's what I'm saying. Yeah. Who knows what it really is?
He'll probably won't end up on any of my teams just in general, but
I could see him going up to like the 220 range around where like Sonny Gray is going. That's the kind of range. Like,
there's no way I'm taking him over Sonny Gray or even Andrew Heaney. Like, I mean, just So
I'm
probably not.
Yeah, if he goes up there, I'm just saying if he looks good, that's probably the point where he's not going to be on any of my rosters anyways.
What about Mike Lorenzen? He signed a deal with the Tigers? It's a pretty nice park to move to. We saw all the Tigers hitters couldn't hit the ball out of the park, so it would kind of mean that maybe Michael Lorenzen keep the ball in the park a little bit. Any interest in Michael Lorenzen, Dave?
The gut feeling is no, but I think he's interesting because he's a guy who kind of, he's a student of the game. He looks at what he makes adjustments. He's a tinkerer. He upped his good pitches last year and stopped throwing some of his less good pitches. I mean, his sinker percentage went from 10% to 22%, which is his best pitch. He upped his slider percent from 13.7 to 20.6. Stopped throwing his cutter as much. It's the 4 walks per 9 that's the problem. I mean, it's hard for me to see him throwing significant innings. I mean, last year he threw 98. And I just, he's not a guy that I would really look to draft, but in a draft and hold kind of league, I think he's interesting as a late pick. Just to see if he makes any more adjustments and to see if he can kind of keep developing as a starter. Because he was a guy who I had zero interest going into last year. And, he did some things that impressed me a bit to take a step forward.
What about you, Phil?
I'm not very interested. Like Dave said, the innings have never been there. The shoulder injuries are frequent. He doesn't seem to be able to be healthy for the whole year. If I'm going to take a risk on a health risk, I want somebody with a better upside than I think you get with Lorenzen. For me, if I were going to throw a dart at the Tiger rotation, I think I'd go with Matt Boyd. Who, his skills he's never seemed to perform up to his skills, but they're there. And his brief September sojourn in Seattle seemed to show that he's reasonably healthy. So if I had to pick between the two, I think I'd go with Boyd, believe it or not.
I honestly didn't even know Boyd signed back in Detroit. That's how and I'm still doing baseball every day. So
I've got a 20-team mixed league. So I have been debating whether or not with a huge amount of keepers, whether he makes my huge amount of keepers. So that's one reason why I knew where he was.
I mean, he only threw like 13 innings last year and it was all in relief. So it's really hard to gauge how, obviously his velocity is going to play up as a reliever and all that stuff. So yeah, he looked good as a reliever. As a starter again, fool me once, fool me twice, fool me 3 times. What are we on now? Like 5 times?
Yeah, but he's free.
Sure.
If he looks good in spring training, you throw a dart, and if it doesn't work out, you drop it and you move on. I'm not stupid.
He goes the same time Lorenzen goes, by the way. They both go after the regular 15-team drafts are done. So they're both post 450. They're 490 and 510. So, you're talking about they're both free picks. So, the upside's low on the Tigers, but at least it's a good park for keeping run suppression down.
To be honest, I'll take Matt Manning. If
you're looking for actual upside, it's Manning for sure.
Yeah. Manning goes 446. I know that he ended the year injured, but supposedly the UCL is intact and fine. And like he really showed me something at the end of the year last year. Like if I'm gonna and I'm not out on Erod. Like I know a lot of people have kind of written Erod off. The Tigers rotation is interesting. I think that Tigers team is an interesting team. I don't know that they're going to be very good necessarily, but definitely it's got some fun storylines to watch.
My reaction is, if you think about it, teams that drop below where you thought they were going to be in one season often are better than what you think they're going to be the following season.
I think that's fair. Yeah, absolutely. Moving on to a guy who is a superstar and signed a big deal. Carlos Rodon signs a 6-year deal to go to the New York Yankees, leaving my San Francisco Giants. Phil, are you in on Rodon at the price now that he moves from the comfy confines of San Francisco to a much more difficult part in New York?
Short answer is no. I think I'd be nervous. I'm still nervous about his health issue. I'm nervous about that short right field porch. And I'm also nervous how he'll handle New York City. There was an interesting quote right after the Mets signed Verlander from someone named Kate Upton. And she said that the Yankees had offered more money than the Mets did, but that they didn't feel like going to a place where the fans boo their own players. And I thought I think that was a reference to the Aaron Judge in the playoff situation, but nevertheless, it's true. I think Met fans will boo occasionally, but they're so used to losing and guys being bums that you don't get the huge amount of boos, whereas the Yankee fans have been known to boo superstars. And I think that if Rodon has a slow start, it may be hard to get himself out of that rut.
Dave, where are you at on Rodon? I know a lot of people don't like a pitcher in a new location, first year of a big deal, but he has been an absolute stud the last 2 years.
Yeah, it's not that I don't think that he can't be really, really good. It's just, weighing the upside of the downside. He's coming off of a huge year where you're paying for that top price. So like within his range of outcomes, he hit his top range of his outcomes last year, and now you have to pay for that to get it again. And I'm just not going to do that. I don't trust the innings. I can get 220 innings from Zach Wheeler going at the same place. Yes, he's a little bit better than Wheeler, but I like Wheeler's ability to stay healthy and to pitch the whole year and to actually when I'm talking about picking the first 50 picks, in the first 4 rounds, I want a guy who's going to be my anchor. I don't want a guy who could potentially just give me 100 innings and that's it. If I want that, I can just take, Clayton Kershaw going quite a bit later than that. So I don't imagine I'm going to end up with Rodon anywhere. And don't underestimate too what that Yankee Park does to pitchers. I mean, he doesn't give up a ton of home runs, but a lot of those fly ball outs from San Francisco turn into home runs in New York.
I'm going to quibble with one thing you said, which is that he's better than Wheeler. He was better than Wheeler last year. But if you go back 2-3 years, that's not necessarily the case.
And I'm going to quibble with everything you said. Well, maybe not everything you said, but I'm going to quibble with a lot you said. One of the reasons why I think Rodon is going to actually be fine in Yankee Stadium is he doesn't give up home runs to left-handed hitters, where those hitters can take advantage of parks. If you look at the X home runs in New York, if he had pitched all of his games in Yankee Stadium last year, he would have given up half the amount of home runs that he gave up in 2022.
I've never. What is I don't know. X stats just seem like kind of bullshit to me. Where is what's the proof of this? That doesn't make any sense. Why would he have given up more home runs in New York's Yankee Stadium?
Because he's a lefty and he doesn't give up He only gave up 2 home runs to lefties last year. They're not going to be able to pull it over to the short porch because he doesn't give up home runs to those. Because of his 12 home runs he gave up last year, he only gave up 2 to left-handed pitching. He stymies lefties. So like I don't think the short porch is going to be as big of an issue as other people do. The question is, can he handle the pressures of New York and things like that? And can he stay healthy, right? I mean, as much as he's been healthy the last 2 seasons, he's got a long track record of not being healthy. Of really
not the
strong...
last 2 seasons. Last season, you mean? The season before, he had 133 innings. I wouldn't call that, healthy.
Okay. So, yeah. So, all right. That's fair. Here's the thing. I think there's going to be a lot of people who go, well, he's moving out of Oracle. He's moving to Yankee Stadium. He's got to take a hit, in terms of the ratios. And I'm sure he will regress some. The question is, like, I don't think it's going to be nearly as much as I think other people.
So you think his ADP is going to drop now?
I think his ADP is going to plummet. Or maybe not plummet, but I think it's going to drop. So. And I think he's going to drop.
I don't think it'll drop. It may drop a little. I think the
5.
average person in a 15-team mixed draft is going to say, "Oh, he's with the Yankees, more wins, blah blah blah."
I don't know that the Yankee tax is as bad as it used to be. This isn't like the 90s and the early 2000s when people really bumped up those Yankees. I think he is going to drop. I'll be interested to see if his ADP drops and he's not going as a top 20 pitcher. And I think right now he's going as like the 15th starting pitcher off the board. I'm going to be all for that. Like I don't have a problem taking that gamble, especially as my SP2. If I can double up on 2 kind of big aces, and he's my SP2, and I've got kind of a stable guy at the top of my rotation, I got no problem taking that gamble. Next guy on the docket, not quite as impactful as Brad Boxberger goes to the Cubs. The only reason I even put him on the rundown is because there is no real set closer in Chicago. Dave, you've covered a lot of closers over the years. Any chance that Brad Boxberger finds himself in a high leverage situation in Chicago?
I mean, there's in Chicago, there's always a chance. They've got like a million guys there who any of them could at some point, end up find themselves closing it, with the whole. They'll probably just play the hot hand approach where they'll just see whoever, they'll let whoever has the best, whoever's pitching the best run away with it. I mean, I like Manny Rodriguez is probably my choice right now for who would be the closer that I would take a shot on. But honestly, I could see them just going with the committee for most of the year anyhow. So Boxberger is like, you can take a shot on him in like a draft and hold kind of league. But outside of that, I don't think I'm really that interested.
Phil, are you interested in Boxberger at all?
No, I'm pretty much where Dave is. I don't think his surface stats are supportable. And I mean, same thing as Dave. If late in the draft, he's sitting there and spring training, no one emerged as the Cub closer, sure, why not? But other than that,
I tend to agree with you guys. So Adam Frazier signs a 1-year deal in Baltimore. Any interest in Adam Frazier, and what does this do to the Baltimore playing time for a guy like maybe Ramon Urias or my boy Jorge Mateo, Phil?
Well, I mean, that was, when you put it on the list in the invite memo, that was sort of my reaction. I'm not real interested in Frazier, but I fear the Orioles are. And not only do we have an impact on Urias and Mateo in terms of who's going to play where, there's some guys coming up in from the minors besides Henderson and Gunnar Henderson. And does this mean they're coming a year later? I think it's kind of weird because you would think the Orioles at this point are good enough that they shouldn't be playing games with keeping guys down in the minors, but maybe until their ownership issues are resolved, that's where they're going to be.
Dave, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Phil said. Hard to believe that they would keep someone else from starting with him just because they have Frazier, but I think he just gives them another option there. I don't know. I feel like I don't know. I I really don't know. It's too early to say, but I think that he gives them kind of that security blanket where if they need to plug him in somewhere, but I can't imagine that they would hesitate moving him out of the way if they had someone that they need to give playing time to.
Yeah, it is only a 1-year deal. And I mean, Jordan Westberg and Kobe Mayo are like interesting prospects, but neither of them are on the 40-man roster as of yet. So I think there's a high likelihood that if we see them at all, it's probably not until September this year, unless one of them forces the issue by just crushing, in AAA.
I think Westberg's a possibility for that.
Yeah, Westberg's an interesting guy. He still has some big flaws, though, in his approach and game. I think he needs to get those ironed out. He did finish the year in AAA, so I think there's a chance. As far as the Orioles themselves go, I think Ramon Urias, he had an offseason surgery. He's supposed to miss 8 to 12 weeks of the offseason, which could go into spring. So I think that it's likely that he may start the year on the IL if he's not quite ready, which would mean Mateo stays at short and Gunnar Henderson is the opening day third baseman. But I do worry about Mateo's ability to stay in the everyday lineup. I think he'll still play even if he loses a quote-unquote starting role, but he could easily turn into kind of a super utility guy on this team. And for me, where he is going in drafts, as much as I've loved Jorge Mateo in the past, and he definitely benefited me this last year, getting him off of waiver wires and things like that with his amazing speed, I think he's going way too high. And so maybe this signing pumps the Jets a little bit on his kind of rise in the ADP, but Mateo going around pick 200 seems crazy to me with those plate skills. So, Trevor May signed a 1-year deal to go to Oakland. Could May potentially be the closer in Oakland there, Phil?
Well, I think Oakland thinks so, but as somebody who watched him extensively the last 2 years, I mean, he had days when you said, why isn't he this good all the time? And then he'd follow it with a day and he'd say, that's why. His numbers actually seem to be better than his skills when all is said and done. But the worst thing about it is it's 2 good days followed by 1 bad day. And, I think you can live with some inconsistency with a relief pitcher, but that hasn't been the case. Now, in his defense, he was hurt for a good chunk of last year, which may have impacted his performance when he wasn't hurt. But, once again, he's somebody like Boxberger, late in the draft. I don't have any a little light on relief pitchers who might close. I throw him in there at that point. But there's a reason the Mets didn't try to re-sign him, because if they wanted to, they could have.
Yeah, absolutely. Dave, you care about Trevor May?
Yeah, no, I have to disagree on that. I think he's a lot more intriguing than Boxberger. I think a lot of his struggles last year were, as Phil mentioned, probably health related. Also, just looks like normal variance for a reliever. Like, he had a 5.27 ERA in 2016 and then came back with a 3.2 ERA the next year. Like, his Sierra is more what I'm looking at, and he was at a 3.29 last year. So he was pitching a lot better than his numbers indicated, even in a small sample. The velocity's still there. You look at who they have in their bullpen, and nobody else in their bullpen is even being paid $1 million. Everybody else is making like $720,000, and then he's making $7 million. So who do you think is going to close? This is what Oakland does. They bring in a veteran. They pump up his value by giving him save opportunities, and they trade him off at the deadline, and get some good, hopefully a solid prospect in return. So I imagine that's what they're going to do once again. So I actually really like Trevor May a lot, because I imagine they're not going to bring in anybody else to really compete with him, because it's Oakland. But the downside is it's Oakland, so he may only get a few save opportunities all year. So it's like, on one hand, I think he's a good shot to close. On the other hand, I don't know how much it matters because they're so bad. But I'm interested. He's definitely a guy I'd be targeting right now.
Yeah, I actually completely agree with you, Dave. I think right now, like if you're looking for like a third closer in a DC, or even once draft season really ramps up. Like I don't think the price is going to go huge. Like you can get 10 saves from him in the first half and then dump him for the next guy off the waiver wire. Because I do think he's going to close, because I think they're going to do exactly what you were saying, which is try to, establish some good value, hope that he's healthy. It's a really great park to pitch in, and then try to flip him for some sort of, high upside, low A prospect, something like that. So I think that Trevor May is a really interesting. And if he sucks again, if he's not healthy, like he's a pretty easy cut for the next, potential closer. I wouldn't want to be relying upon him as my number 2 closer at all. But as my number 3, especially, he'll definitely rise in the ADP after the signing. But like, could he be? I mean, he's not going to be Daniel Bard in terms of the volume of saves that we saw from Daniel Bard last year. But could he be that kind of like guy who goes in the 28th, 29th rounds of drafts and returns a fair amount of value in the first half? Absolutely. I totally can see it. I could also see him just not be healthy and be awful again. So I think you're taking a gamble, but I think it's a low risk gamble for the most part. Speaking about a guy who's definitely a gamble, but not a low risk gamble, even though the price is depressed, Joey Gallo signs a 1-year contract to go play for the Twins. Phil, do you care about Joey Gallo?
Well, once again, he's kind of like Mike Zunino for me in some respects. If you've got a lot of batting average or you're in an OBP league, this is a guy who's only 29 years of age and hit 38 homers in 2021. So, I mean, if you're power starved and batting average plus, he's somebody I'd want to consider putting on my team towards the end of the draft. So I have a mild interest in him, not a huge amount of interest.
Dave?
I mean, he's the guy I avoid every single year because he's just, the contact is so terrible. But having said that, and we're talking outside of OBP leagues, of course, which is different. But with the shift rules now, I'm going to let people who know more about this kind of thing than me, I'm going to read what they have to write and then see what I think, because I don't know. I know he pulls the ball a lot. I know he hits the ball hard. He pulls the ball 55% last year. It seems like if you pull the ball a lot and you hit the ball hard and there's no longer a shift, it seems like he would be getting more hits, right? I don't know. I've read other people were more.
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I was looking up like who would benefit the most from the shift, and his name didn't come up as much as I thought it would. So I don't know. Common sense would tell me that he might have a shot at being relevant next year, but right now I'm in a holding pattern. I'm not looking to draft him, but I'm keeping an open mind.
Yeah, I mean, he. It's hard to tell whether or not he will benefit from the shift because he was shifted so much. There just isn't very much data. So, and the problem is when you swing and miss as much as him, like it doesn't matter if there's a shift if you're not making contact. Like he didn't qualify for like a batting title or anything like that. If he had, he would have been like in the top 20 in terms of worst zone contact in the league, and that is saying something because 2022 is actually his best zone contact of his career. Like this is who he is. Like he is just not good at making contact. When Joey Gallo hit ball go boom, but he just don't hit ball enough. And it doesn't matter where the defense plays if you're striking out. That being said, like I have drafted Joey Gallo before for a reason, looking for power. And like Phil mentioned, on base percentage leagues, he does walk at a double-digit rate.
That's
sometimes as high as like 15-16%. It's and this is the time to buy if you're gonna buy, right? Problem is like he could pretty easily, especially with the way the Twins are set up right now, get platooned. Which is funny to me because like he's just as bad against lefties as he is against righties because he's just bad. So like there's no real major platoon split when your platoon splits are awful and awful.
Don't forget on the issue is if they have a right-handed batter who they trust against lefties.
Yeah, and that's
then that's where the plus is.
When you've got Kyle Garlick who can actually hit lefties pretty well, it does make sense, and that's potentially. But the problem is too, they've also got other guys on this team that they would like to take out against lefties. Kepler got taken out against lefties a fair amount last year. So I don't know. Yeah, you can only platoon so many players unless you're the Giants or the Rays apparently. So I guess I get it, but someone in the chat, NHP NOB, said minimum 400 plate appearances. He had the third lowest zone contact rate behind Chris Taylor and Christopher Morel.
I can't believe Chris Taylor was that bad. Like, I know Morel is that bad. I'm shocked that Chris Taylor is that bad.
He had a bad year.
Yeah, he was injured a lot and really, really struggled. And so I think Taylor rebound. But Morel's plate skills, I've been talking about it for a while.
Oh, it's so bad.
His plate skills are atrocious.
I
know there's some people who really like him, and he's a really likable young guy and stuff. But the play, there is no success if he can't change his plate skills.
Well, I liked him when I was forced to like him, when I had him on my team and I needed steals and homers, and he was a guy who could provide both. And, I was just hoping that they would play him, and they didn't. So, now that he's not on my roster, I, don't necessarily need to see a whole lot more of Chris Morel right now.
You couldn't pay me to put him on one of my fantasy teams. Like, it's just really, absolutely not. Andrew Benintendi signed a 5-year deal with the White Sox. What seems to be a clear overpay, but it's a nice shift to, from Kansas City in a bad park in Kauffman to whatever they're calling the White Sox Stadium nowadays. I've completely forgot. I can't keep up with it anymore. But Dave, any interest in Andrew Benintendi?
Yeah, so this is a guy who is going to be 28 years old. He's a former first-round pick. We've seen some elite partial seasons. Especially 2017, 2018, we saw what looked like a budding skill set, and then he kind of fell off a cliff a little bit in some aspects. But I do think that there's a reason to keep some faith there. He had the highest max EV of his career last year. If he can pair that with the 9% barrel rate that he had in 2021, and then also we saw last year, he didn't really run in Kansas City. I don't know. We always thought of Kansas City as this team that would be running a lot, and then they just kind of put on the red light for several guys. We saw it with Merrifield too. But then he went to New York, where they were actually contending team, and he stole as many bases in 131 plate appearances as he did in 400 plate appearances with Kansas City before that. So I'm wondering if now that he's on a team that should be competitive next year with the White Sox, if we're going to see him, continue to run more. So I think we could see more steals from him, especially with the new rules. He's got a good, plate approach. He doesn't strike out much. He walks a good amount. There's a lot of skills there. There's a lot of reasons to believe, as long as you're not paying for a superstar cost, this is a 2020 potential skill set. So am I interested? Yeah, I am.
Phil?
I'm also interested. I think the shift to Chicago will be really good for him. And for me, the more almost as interesting as Benintendi to the White Sox is it may increase Elo Jimenez's value because he's not going to play the field that much. And if he doesn't play the field, he may not get hurt as much. So
I've always said Eloy as a DH could be an MVP. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I like Benintendi in the Whites in Chicago, and I like the White Sox getting him because of the potential boost for Jimenez.
Yeah, they've already told Jimenez to leave his glove at home, that he's not going to play the field at all in 2023. Really? Yeah, that was earlier. The first thing the new White Sox manager said was that he told Eloy to leave the glove at home.
We've been saying it for 3 years now. I mean, it's been so obvious the guy cannot stay upright.
I was not going to be drafting Eloy at all this year. But then I looked into his injuries, and almost all of his injuries have been either in the field or celebrating. He hurt himself during Giolito's no-hitter, pulled the calf muscle.
Well, that's possible still.
For a guy who's as good of a hitter as he is, he is so unathletic. Like if you watch him play the outfield, he just looks like I mean I don't even know. Like watching him gallop around the outfield trying to like go after balls, like he's just a walking injury. Like he's about to hurt himself doing something. So like cleat himself running over to a ball somewhere. So this him not playing the field is huge.
Yeah, absolutely. As far as Benintendi goes, I don't know if there could have been a better fit for him. I know the White Sox overpaid on this one in Oregon, but they really, really needed him, especially with Vaughn going to first, with Eloy not playing the outfield. They were going to be running out me in left field, and that would not have ended well for anybody. So I think this is kind of a perfect fit for them. He's a guy who can get on base. I don't know that he's ever going to get near 20 home runs again. I think he's probably like a 15-15 guy, but 15-15 going around pick 248 right now, that's clearly going to go up probably maybe to around pick 200, but 15-15 with a good batting average and a boatload of runs kind of hitting second in front of Eloy, I'll take that all day long. Like that's a pretty good spot for him. So, hopefully he can stay healthy. Injuries have been an issue for him in the past. So just remember that when you're, kind of constructing your rosters, that he will likely miss time at some point. So the next guy on the docket is another guy moving spots. JD Martinez signs a 1-year deal with the Dodgers. Martinez definitely had a down year. It wasn't an awful year. We're not talking like Nelson Cruz fall apart, but there definitely was some skill degradation. Phil, what are your thoughts on JD Martinez going to the Dodgers?
Well, I am mildly interested, I guess, is where I am. I certainly don't know that his ADP gets boosted for me from where he has been. I think being in that lineup takes some of the pressure off him a bit. But on the other end, he's not going to have the wall to help him with some power. So mildly interested. I like it from the Dodgers perspective. We were going to talk about Justin Turner a little later, but switching him for Justin Turner, if that's essentially what you've done, is a net gain for the Dodgers.
Dave?
Yeah, I mean, I think he got pretty unlucky last year with his home run total. I think despite the skill degradation, 16 homers was still less than what you would expect given his 111.6 max EV, 41.5% hard hit rate, like 12.5% barrel rate. The hard hit percentage and the max EV are not as high as I don't think we're ever going to see that peak JD Martinez again. So I think you need to keep your expectations in check, but he is going to the second best power hitters home run field for righties after the Reds Great American Small Park. So Dodger Stadium plays really well to right-handed power. So yeah, I'm interested. I just I don't want to pay a big price, but I also don't feel like I'm probably not going to have to. I mean, he's going like 250 right now. He's going around the same time that Benintendi's going. I'd rather take a shot on Benintendi. To be fair, there's more upside there for me. There's more paths to value with the steals and everything. But Martinez can still be. He's going to be hitting the middle of a stacked lineup, like Phil was saying. So I think he's a guy you shouldn't forget about.
Yeah, and I mean, his ADP probably will go up a little bit. Just because signing with the Dodgers and be hitting, potentially in the middle of that Dodgers lineup. His bat was slower. And I mean, I don't think there's any question that he's definitely aging and Father Time is catching up with him. However, you look at the home runs in Dodger Stadium, he would have had 24 home runs had he played his games in Dodger Stadium, kind of alluding to your point, Dave, about Dodger Stadium playing well for right-handed power. So I'm definitely not out. And I think a lot of people will just take him off their board because he's UT only, right? He's losing outfield eligibility. He didn't play a single game in the outfield last year. There are a lot of people who just won't touch players like that, which should make him a decent value. We're talking about a guy who's previously been third, fourth, fifth round pick in fantasy that you're now getting much, much later than that. So I don't have a problem with JD Martinez in general, as a Dodger. I mean, I wish he wasn't a Dodger as a Giants fan, but I think it's a nice little deal for the Dodgers. I don't really understand what they're doing this offseason, but
I don't think they do either.
Yeah, from a straight fantasy perspective, I kind of I don't mind it at all. Dansby Swanson heading to the Cubs on a 7-year deal. Dave, are you worried about Swanson moving out of Atlanta? Do you think he takes a hit, or are you fine drafting him where he's going in Chicago?
I'll be honest with you, I haven't really looked into him a ton, but from what I've been reading, it feels like I think he's probably going higher than I'll be willing to pay. I think he's coming off of a career year. I don't know that he's going to run that much again. Anytime you got someone on a contract year and then, like you said, first year of a big contract, it scares me a little bit. I think, he outperformed his average. Like, I don't think he's like a 280 hitter. I think he's probably more of like a 250-ish, maybe 260 at most hitter in general. Yeah, I mean, it's not a bad park for him or anything. I don't think, at least if I'm remembering the Cubs park factors correctly, right? It's not a bad park for righties.
You actually would have had more home runs, I think 33 in Chicago as opposed to the 25 in Atlanta. So it's actually a pretty decent jump for him.
And where was he hitting in Atlanta's lineup last year? Because
he bounced around quite a bit.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to look up right now, because I remember he hit kind of towards he hit second for the vast majority of his of last year. The previous year, I know he hit like 6th, 7th a lot. But I imagine with the Cubs, he'll be near the top of their lineup as well. So I think he's good. I just feel like he's probably going to go. Like, I think you're going to have to pay for that again. Like, in the range of outcomes, I think he probably just had his career year, and you'd have to be paying for it. And that's generally not what I do in fantasy. I want to pick up the guys who are coming off of a down year where their skill level is still good, but they just got unlucky last year and they're going to do better. I feel like he can't really do much better than he did last year.
Phil, what are your thoughts on Swanson?
I like Swanson. I like him in Chicago. I mean, he may be at the bottom of that first cliff, but I consider him, I'd be happy if I came out of the draft with Swanson as my shortstop, so long as I didn't draft him too soon, if you follow what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, I think he's fairly priced right now. Like, I think this is a good park switch for him. I think he's guaranteed at second pretty much all year in Chicago. Chicago was 4th in the majors in terms of stolen bases last year. So while I think he does probably take a little bit of a step back in stolen bases, like, I think 15 is still attainable. I think 27-ish home runs is attainable. I think 250 batting average is attainable. And he plays every day. Like, he just plays. Like, when we start talking about some of the other guys going around him, like Tim Anderson is the shortstop going right after him. Tim Anderson, I love Tim Anderson when he's on the field. He's just not on the field. Like, Tommy Edman is, a really good stolen base guy, but like, there are some real red flags with Tommy Edman too. O'Neal Cruz is going ahead of him. Corey Seager is going ahead of him.
Red
both
flags
of them
there.
have red flags. So like, I think Swanson may be like the boring pick out of the group, but it's actually a pretty darn good boring pick. And it's weird for me, having been a longtime Dansby Swanson denier, to feel like I'm on board, but I'm actually on board on Dansby.
Every year's a new year, Justin. You can't be held to your past takes. Whatever you felt about someone in a previous year, can be on them next year.
I was not convinced a year ago, but back-to-back 27-plus home run seasons is interesting.
Yeah, I think, and like, he's a good defender. He's going to play every day. He's going to accumulate at worst, but at best, like, we've seen what he can do when things do click for him. I like Dansby Swanson quite a bit.
Yeah,
so.
For what it's worth, Joe Sheehan this morning had a big discussion on him, and he was he thought it was a good move for the Cubs, particularly at the comparable prices that others were paying, and he listed the Cubs as a contender for the last NL wild card.
I like the Cubs. I
tweeted
about that the other day. I think that they're a team they have a lot of upside to be a solid team next year. I mean, I mean, Ian Happ could have a big year. Nico Horner, who I said I really like. Seiya Suzuki in year 2. They brought in Bellinger if they can, make him into something good again. They got Mervis, they got Brennan Davis, and I really like their rotation. I think their rotation is actually underrated. Like right now, Fangraphs isn't even projecting Wisniewski for their rotation, who I think is really good. But between Stroman and Tyon and Steele, I even think Adrian Sampson is not bad too. So we'll see if Kyle Hendricks has anything left in the tank. But
and then there were some reports that they were close on deal with Drew Smiley again. So like they've actually got a lot of depth in the rotation. The bullpen is a mess. Like the bullpen is clearly the weak point on this roster. But I think it's a pretty Seiya Suzuki. I'm all over Seiya Suzuki this year. Unfortunately, a lot of other people are too because the price is not nearly
second year for those international players. Yeah.
Well, and he was the only player in baseball with a top 25 zone contact percentage and top 25 barrel percentage in the second half. Like he was quietly really, really good in the underlying skills in the second half. So
I like him a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. So Suzuki's one of my dudes this year. Unfortunately, like I said, a lot of other people are in it. So he's not a sleeper. He's a wide awake sleeper, as my other co-host Paul Sporer likes to say. Connor Joe was traded to the Pittsburgh Pirates. Joe was a really, really popular guy coming into drafts last year that disappointed a lot of people. Phil, you were just yawning. Don't care about Connor Joe?
Connor Joe, I wasn't one of those in on Connor Joe last year. I thought he was going to be a 4A player. He hit something like 230 away from Coors Field last year. He's going to a Pirate team where you can't hide. My reaction to this was, I know it's the Pirates, but why?
That's fair. Dave, do you care?
I think that question could be applied to a lot of things over the last 20 years in that organization, Phil. No, I don't really care. I don't even think he's projected to start there, is he? I mean, I think
he's not on roster resource, but he's gonna.
He's better versus lefties. They could use him in they've got so many lefty righty split platoon kind of guys there that I feel like they'll probably start. I don't know, Sawinski or whatever, or Cal Mitchell, and then they'll probably have him be
both those guys suck.
Part. What?
I said both those guys suck. Like maybe
so does Connor Joe. They all suck. I mean, this is just a one big suck fest. I mean, Brian Reynolds is just over here screaming like, "Get me out of this place."
Yeah, how they? I mean, I think Reynolds gets traded at some point, but
come to Cleveland, Brian. We love you here.
On the bad side, he's leaving Coors Field. On the good side, he now has a clearer path to playing time than he apparently did in Colorado. Colorado pretty much just gave up on him towards the end of the season, and rightfully so. He was struggling. He still has good contact skills. The problem is he needs to raise the launch angle because when he makes contact, he's hitting in the ground way too often. I see a path to him having mixed league viability, but I think it's going to be off the waiver wire. It shouldn't be in most drafts outside of draft champions. So, Michael Brantley re-signs with the Astros. Dave, Brantley's one of those guys. When he's on the field, he's productive, but he struggles to stay on the field. Are you interested in Brantley at all?
Yeah, I mean, he is what he is, I guess is the way to put it. But if you're looking for a high average, low power accumulator he's probably going to be hitting relatively. Let me put it this way: he's probably going to be hitting higher than he should be in that lineup. I mean, he's probably just going to keep Kyle Tucker down hitting like sixth still. So, as Tucker and Pena all hit too low in that lineup, but while he's healthy, he's fine. It's just a question of how many. He's just so uninteresting that I don't know that I want him in a regular league. Like in a draft and hold, I think he's fine, but I don't know.
Phil, any interest in Brantley?
Mild interest. I mean, one of the things that increases my interest is I don't think his injury from last year is a lurking injury problem for this year. On the other hand, he seems to be finding more ways to get hurt. But the one value to him is when he's playing, you know what you're going to get. And if you're in a league with a nice reserve list, you can pop the player in there whenever he's out, so that it may not be a total loss.
Yeah, I mean, at this point in his career, like, what is he? Like, he's a guy who probably gets 400 plate appearances, if that, and like, he doesn't really give you much more than batting average and some runs scored. Like, the fact that Roster Resource probably rightfully has him pegged into the 2 hole to start the season over a guy like Kyle Tucker is just maddening to me. But yeah, I just like his draft and hold. He's probably worth being drafted. The problem is in draft and holds, I want volume. I want guys that I know I'm going to get volume from, and you just can't guarantee you're going to get volume from him. And so it seems unlikely Michael Brantley ends up on any of my teams this year. Let's finish out with the aforementioned Justin Turner leaving Los Angeles, which was a little surprising to me. I really thought that he would re-sign in Los Angeles, signing a 2-year deal to go to the Red Sox. Phil, I'll start with you, and I'm going to kind of phrase 2 different questions. One, are you interested in Justin Turner for fantasy this year? And then more importantly, how soon before the Boston Red Sox trade Rafael Devers potentially to your Mets?
I have very mild interest in Turner, probably below where he's going right now, but I wouldn't kill me to have him on the team. I mean, he's getting old, his skills are dropping. The question is, when does the cliff come? And he's also getting injured more. He missed a chunk of time last year. For me, his ideal use would be as a platoon player against left-handed pitching. But that's not why I think he's there. So I think they were better off with JD Martinez, and I'm not sure JD would have cost him that much more to keep. And you're right, Devers is probably gone by July.
Man, sucks for Red Sox fans. Dave, what are your thoughts?
Sorry, Eric Cross.
Yeah.
He's in a group chat with me, and he just comes in and starts swearing about Chime Bloom all the time. He hates him. As a small market fan, as a fan of a team that's in the small market, I love to see the big market struggling and making dumb moves and everything. It's nothing better than that. I wish it was the Yankees instead of the Red Sox, but I got enough hatred for the Red Sox too. Turner, you kind of know what he is at this point. And he's going from, one of the best parks for power for right-handers to the Red Sox park Fenway's still good. It's not Dodgers good, but it is good for getting hits. He'll be able to smack it off the wall quite a bit there. So I think that the average will stay high. You look at his 2021 to 2022, is there a decline in skills? Maybe a little bit, you can see the hard hit rate slipping a bit. But the K rate stayed the same, walk rate stayed the same, barrel rate stayed the same, launch angle same. He doesn't look that much worse to me than his 2021 where he had 27 homers with a 280 average. So, I think he could do something similar. I don't think he's going to hit 27 homers there, but I think he can hit 22 to 24 with a 280 to 290 average possibly. And it's just a matter of staying healthy. The older you get, obviously the more difficult that is. And he's 38, he's not getting old. He's been old. So as someone who's only a year his senior, I can tell you it's not fun getting old. So you kind of got to know what you're getting into when you draft him, but I think he still has value for sure.
Well, and here's the thing, in Los Angeles, they were putting Max Muncy as the DH and getting Will Smith time as DH. He's going to be the full-time DH, at least until they trade Devers in Boston. So hopefully that keeps him healthier and maybe he can get back to 500 plate appearances. He was really, really good from August on. Hit 318 or 319.
I think he was just incredibly unlucky before that. I think it was finally the luck was starting to go the other way. The regression was hitting.
Yeah. So, definitely has been some skill degradation. But I still think he can be a pretty useful guy, especially at the price. And I'm hoping the DH can keep him a little bit healthier throughout kind of at least the first part of the season. And so yeah, I'm always kind of a Justin Turner fan. Like I think
he's going like 320. You know,
yeah,
like the guys you're taking around him are not anything exciting either. So
yeah, no, I'm all for that price. It'll probably go up a little bit now that he signed, but
sure,
I'm still fine with that. I mean, I was willing to take him like 150, 170 last year. Like I'll take him at 250 or something like that. It's no problem. So, all right, that's gonna wrap us up for this episode. Phil, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
My
Phil.
pleasure, guys. Have a good evening.
Remind everybody where you can be reached on social media and plug all your work.
It's at PRHZ50 and Baseball HQ, and I'm the NL East expert, I guess.
There you go. And Dave, where can you be reached and what are you working on?
At Run DMCD on Twitter, and that's it for right now.
All right. You reach me on Twitter at Justin Mason FWFB. You can reach Friends of Fantasy Benefits on Twitter at Fantasy Benefits.
Did Justin just freeze?
I think so. I'm going to hang up, guys.
All right, Phil, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Dave. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right. Well, this has never happened before. I guess I will end the call then. And we'll see you guys next week.